feel like I've done this before. Another episode of Stargate SG-1. Reminder, I was only commissioned for 2 specific episodes. I've already talked about the premiere episode, the very first one, and now we're going to talk about Window of Opportunity. This is from season 4. And I had wondered, because I've sometimes had it where people have commissioned me for 2 episodes from a show that aren't, consecutive. They aren't back-to-back episodes. And it becomes clear when I watch it, why they're put together, because there's thematic similarities or they focus on the same characters or whatever. Not really the case here. I think this was just a case of the commissioner wanted me to have the general background and setup of what Stargate SG-1 was before handing me this one to take a look at. So, as I said, this is season 4, and this is just straightforwardly a time loop episode. Time loops are fun. I like time loops. I like time loop movies. I like time loop episodes of TV shows. They're pretty standard, actually, especially in sci-fi settings. Almost anything that goes on for long enough, has enough seasons, will do a time loop episode. Star Trek has done, I'm pretty sure, several time loop episodes. Legends of Tomorrow did a actually shockingly good time loop episode. And they can just, in general, be a lot of fun. And this is a pretty good amount of fun. There's nothing really revolutionary about it. But there's a few small tweaks here and there that I rather like. So we start out on a planet that has, sort of our core group of characters. So that's O'Neill, who generally heads these teams. You have Jack, who's the archaeologist. You have Carter, who was the character who I complained about, came in and was all like, "I'm a woman." Yeah. She what was the line? Something about not judging me just because her sex organs were on the inside instead of the outside. It was so bad. It was so cringe. She's here. Thankfully, way less cringe, although there is one thing done with her. I'm going to have comments. And then Teal'c, big guy, one of the alien race, but he is working with the Stargate program. So they are doing what I think is pretty standard on this, which is they are on a distant planet, checking stuff out, trying to learn some stuff. And there's this archaeologist there working with Jack. No, not Jack, Daniel. Because it's Daniel Jackson. I knew I was going to get that wrong. Daniel. Because it's Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson. Do you get how, if you haven't seen a ton of the show, this is confusing? Anyways, Daniel's working with this archaeologist, and then something happens. Like this altar that he's examining, the pieces start moving around, and things get really weird. And O'Neill and Teal'c try and lunge and stop this archaeologist from doing whatever he's going to do, and then suddenly they find themselves about 10 hours ago. And they are now caught in a time loop. Actually, everybody is caught in a time loop, but they're the only ones who remember. Basically, from having been at the epicenter of the thing when it went off. They remember, but everyone else doesn't. Now, there's a couple of things that are nice about this. Firstly, this is one of the only time loop stories I can think of where people are aware that they're in a time loop, where there's more than one of them. It's actually really common to do it as an isolation piece for one character who realizes. Either that or nobody realizes, and figuring out that this is what they're dealing with is what everybody has to do. But this has 2 people. And more interestingly, neither of them are particularly well equipped to explain what's going on. O'Neill, I don't want to say he's an idiot. He's not. But he doesn't pay too much attention to the technicals. He knows there are other people on his team that are good at that. When he gets information from them, he asks for the bullet-pointed, dumbed-down version just because he knows that's all he needs to know. So when he first realizes he's in a time loop, he's trying to remember like some things that happen, like he's being asked questions about the temple and the electromagnetic stuff that went on. What caused this? And he's like, I don't know. It was something kind of like this, I guess. Like he's just so unequipped to explain what it is. There's a lot more focus put on O'Neill than on Teal'c, but Teal'c has some fun moments too. When you eventually get shown the exact moment that he gets returned to, because Jack O'Neill. I gotta pick one thing and stick with it. O'Neill gets sent back to like this moment where Daniel is asking him a question as O'Neill is eating Fruit Loops of all things. And that's the moment that he keeps snapping back to. I'm not going to spoil what it is because it got a good laugh out of me. But finding out the moment that Teal'c goes back to every time, that was good. I like that. And you get that frustration with them where like we get to see like the first 3, maybe 4 loops more or less in their entirety. And then we start doing big jumps and we realize, oh, this is way later. There have been so many loops up to this point. And the early ones are really interesting because they just get so frustrated because they just want to get to the point where they can make some progress. Both Teal'c and O'Neill just get very like, look, we've had this conversation. Here's what's going on. You're going to tell me to go get examined by the doctor, and I understand why, but I wish you wouldn't because it's a waste of time. Cut to them being examined by the doctor. It's nice. It's well balanced. It oddly, I tuned out a little bit when they have what is, basically the Groundhog Day revelation of they can do anything they want and time's going to reset, so there's no consequences. Like it's kind of cute, but weirdly, Daniel points that out. I don't know. Something about the idea of them messing around, having to be suggested by somebody else made it land odd. Not in like a massively damaging way, but like, I think it says a lot about a character for them to realize, and like I could buy O'Neill eventually realizing this because, we had seen him previously in at least one loop going like, I'm taking this loop off. Let me relax. But it takes Daniel pointing it out. And then it kind of falls into the kind of just generic over the topness. I say over the top, but just stuff that obviously they can't normally do. Like they're playing golf through the Stargate, and this is the bit with Carter that I don't care for, which is in one of the time loops, as it's a joke, obviously, but O'Neill resigns and then starts making out with Carter. Now, like, look, here's the thing. 4 seasons in, maybe this has been built up to. Maybe there is like acknowledged sexual tension between these two characters. Maybe they've even had a conversation like, yeah, look, there's something here, but we can't. Like, you're my commanding officer. This can never happen. Which, if that is the case, awesome. Be nice if more things would acknowledge that. But if that is the case, maybe this moment lands better. But I don't know if it's the case. For all I know, this is just a random moment that happens because he decides he wants to make out with a woman consequence-free. Like, I don't want to say this in defense of the moment, but just to be clear, like, she does seem to be reciprocal and into it, which, I don't know. Honestly, that specific moment might be a big part of why the whole do things consequence-free montage landed weird is just because of that moment. I don't know. There's some other fun little things like watching O'Neill like have to start to focus on the stuff that he normally doesn't pay attention to because no one else is going to remember. So he has to learn how to explain it, not just repeat the words, but what they mean, because he's going to get follow-up questions every time and he has to know how to answer those. So, that's an interesting way to go about this. It's also kind of poignant when we get to the reason for this, because the archaeologist is doing this on purpose. He's set up this whole thing. No one else was supposed to get caught in the time loop, but like this. Well, there's a couple things. First is it's interesting that this is like an ancient device that was created because the occupants of this planet were in a real bad situation. It's unclear as to what, but something was on the verge of wiping them out. And they tried to create a proper time machine so that they could go back and, if not prevent it, at least get off the planet. But they never could get it to work. All they could get it to do was to set the time loop so that they could keep working on it and try and get it to work, but they never ever did. And eventually, who knows how long this took, they just gave up and let the end come. Like, as a history and a background to this device, that's kind of neat. And then we get the backstory for the archaeologist. Why can I not think of words now? But we get his motivation, and he's just trying to get back to see his wife again, who died years ago. And he's now done the same thing. He's stuck himself in a time loop over and over and over again so that he can try to figure out how to make this work so he can go back. Not to save her. He knows he can't. She had a congenital heart condition. There wasn't really anything that he could do, but he just wanted to see her again. And having something that simple as the motivation, it was actually an interesting choice, and especially with how it connects to O'Neill and a bit of O'Neill's history that I do know because it's in the movie as well, you know, with really severe loss in his own past. So the way that ends up resolving is pretty nicely done. Overall, I do like the episode. It's just the screw it, we can do whatever we want montage that I don't love. Like, you know what I think part of it is that, like, the energy of those kinds of montage, it had actually already given us, because, like, we're watching O'Neill and Teal'c learn from Daniel about this translation so that they can get a little bit further on what everything means each time. But at the same time that they're being taught this, Teal'c and O'Neill are figuring out how to juggle. So you're watching them do that. So, like, you get that sense of boredom. So I got that energy. I didn't need the additional montage. And then you had to have the kiss in there. Great, fine, whatever. But no, this was good. Like, as somebody who doesn't really, like, has only seen the first episode of this show and the movie that it spun off from and not anything else, solid stuff. I dug it. Window of opportunity. You seen this episode? What'd you think of it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills. Enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those all help as well. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. And now to thank my highest supporting patrons. Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Subin Lutfulla, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperol, Dave Hall, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Ulrich, Twylord, Tracy Scrabbit, Palba Rabajoggle, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and thanking some random folks from the lower tiers of my Patreon, Puck, Lady Sammy, and Eva Bright. Don't worry, the rats are fine. Just thought we'd kick the year off with Archie. What you think, bud? He's skeptical.